Fix this $2.8 million engine and I'll marry you right here, boy. Alexandra Sterling's voice cut through the boardroom like a blade, her diamond bracelet catching the harsh fluorescent lights as she gestured toward the silent machine. 200 employees pressed against the glass walls, their faces a mixture of horror and fascination. The German investors sat frozen in leather chairs, Klaus Weber's steel-gray eyes reflecting the unfolding corporate theater. Marcus Thompson stood alone in his maintenance uniform, toolbox clutched in calloused hands that had rebuilt engines since childhood. The live stream cameras captured every breath, every bead of sweat forming on his dark brow. Alexandra's red-soled heels clicked against marble as she circled him like a predator. When you fail, and you will fail, security escorts you out permanently. Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Let's see what our maintenance boy can do with problems that stumped MIT engineers for 3 months. The room held its breath. $50 million in contracts hung in the balance. Marcus felt his grandfather's voice whisper from memory. Sometimes you gotta stand up, son, even when standing might break you. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The glass towers of Silicon Valley's tech district gleamed in the afternoon sun, but inside Precision Automotive Technology's 42nd floor, shadows gathered like storm clouds. Alexandra Sterling had built her empire from the bones of her father's failures, each corporate victory a small revenge against the memory of Charles Sterling's humiliation 25 years earlier. At 36, Alexandra commanded respect through fear. Her platinum blonde hair pulled into a razor-sharp bun, her Armani suits tailored to intimidate rather than impress. The tech world whispered about her ruthless efficiency, how she'd clawed her way to the CEO position by dismantling rivals with surgical precision. What they didn't know was the nightmare that drove her, the image of her father weeping in their Detroit garage after Frank Thompson made him look like a fool at Ford Motor Company. The company's crown jewel sat broken in the executive conference room. A revolutionary hybrid engine worth $2.8 million, designed to power the next generation of electric delivery trucks. This wasn't just machinery. It represented 3 years of development, 67 patents, and the dreams of America's brightest automotive engineers. For 3 agonizing months, the engine had defied every repair attempt. It would run flawlessly for exactly 23 minutes, then shut down with the same cryptic error: harmonic resonance failure. Marcus Thompson knew every inch of those marble floors. For 2 years, he'd pushed his maintenance cart through these halls, invisible to executives who stepped around him like furniture. His official title read Facilities Maintenance Coordinator, but everyone understood the reality. He emptied trash cans, mopped floors, and endured daily humiliation from people who'd never worked with their hands. What they didn't know would change everything. Hidden in his maintenance locker lay an MIT diploma, summa cum laude, with a thesis on mechanical acoustic engineering that had impressed professors from Cambridge to Caltech. While his former classmates built careers in gleaming offices, Marcus had chosen a different path, one paved with sacrifice and love. His mother, Dorothy Thompson, sat in a care facility battling Alzheimer's, her brilliant mind, once designing transmissions for General Motors, slowly fading into confusion. His sister, Sarah, paralyzed from the waist down since a drunk driver shattered their family 8 years ago, needed round-the-clock care that insurance barely covered. The math was simple and devastating. MIT dreams cost money they didn't have, but maintenance work paid the bills that kept his family afloat. Every night, Marcus studied the broken engine's blueprints left scattered on conference tables. His grandfather Isaiah's voice echoed in his memory, "Engines got souls, boy. You just gotta know how to listen to their heartbeat." The crisis began on a Tuesday morning in October when autumn leaves painted Silicon Valley in shades of amber and gold. Marcus arrived for his 5 a.m. shift to find the executive floor buzzing with an energy that felt like electricity before a storm. Emergency meetings had been called. Consultants rushed through hallways carrying tablets and wearing expressions of barely controlled panic. The revolutionary hybrid engine, Precision Automotive's ticket to dominating the electric vehicle market, had failed its final certification test. Not just failed, but failed spectacularly, filling the testing facility with smoke and triggering every fire suppression system in the building. The failure had occurred exactly 23 minutes and 14 seconds into the test, just as it had in the previous 47 attempts. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the company's head of engineering, stood before a whiteboard covered in equations that looked like hieroglyphics to anyone without advanced degrees. Her team of MIT, Stanford, and Caltech graduates stared at diagnostic readouts that told them nothing useful. The error message remained maddeningly consistent. Harmonic resonance failure, source unknown. It's impossible, muttered David Chen, a mechanical engineer whose thesis on thermal dynamics had won awards at 3 universities. Every component tests perfectly individually. The software runs flawlessly in simulation, but put them together, and after 23 minutes it's like the engine tears itself apart from the inside. Marcus pushed his cart quietly along the conference room's perimeter, emptying waste baskets and pretending not to listen. But his mind, trained by years at MIT and decades of his grandfather's wisdom, was analyzing every word. The pattern was familiar, hauntingly so. He'd seen similar symptoms in his grandfather Isaiah's Detroit garage, back when American muscle cars ruled the roads and engines were built by men who understood their mechanical souls. The financial pressure mounted like water behind a dam. Klaus Weber and his delegation from Hoffman Automotive Group had flown from Munich specifically to evaluate this engine. Their investment of $150 million could transform Precision Automotive from a promising startup into a global powerhouse. But if the engine couldn't pass certification, the Germans would walk away, taking their money and credibility with them. Alexandra Sterling paced the boardroom like a caged predator, her Louboutin heels clicking against marble in sharp, angry rhythms that made interns flinch. Coffee cups accumulated on tables like archaeological layers, marking the progression of her desperation. The dark circles under her perfectly applied makeup betrayed sleepless nights spent reviewing reports that all said the same thing: failure. 67 million, she snapped at the engineering team during one particularly brutal afternoon meeting. That's what we lose if this engine doesn't work by Friday. $67 million that could have bought us market dominance in 12 major cities. The engineers, Harvard, MIT, Stanford graduates earning 6-figure salaries, sat frozen in their expensive suits, their laptops displaying the same error codes they'd been staring at for months. None of their advanced degrees prepared them for this level of public humiliation from a CEO whose reputation for ruthlessness was legendary even by Silicon Valley standards. Marcus had begun studying the engine during his night shifts when the office fell silent and he could work without curious eyes tracking his every movement. He'd obtained copies of the technical specifications through channels that would have horrified his supervisors. Maintenance staff wasn't supposed to access confidential engineering documents. But Marcus had learned long ago that rules were often obstacles to understanding, and understanding was the first step toward solutions. The engine's voice spoke to him in frequencies that the expensive diagnostic equipment couldn't detect. His grandfather's training had taught him to listen with more than his ears, to feel vibrations through his fingertips, to smell the subtle chemical signatures of overheating components, to recognize the rhythm of mechanical distress that others dismissed as normal operation. Late one Thursday night, while security cameras recorded nothing more suspicious than a maintenance worker doing his job, Marcus placed his hands on the silent engine and felt its story unfold beneath his palms. The German components were manufactured to tolerances measured in hundredths of millimeters, precise as Swiss clockwork. But the American control software expected tolerances measured in thousandths of inches, a difference so small that most engineers would dismiss it as irrelevant. That tiny discrepancy created a cascade of problems. The engine's German heart beat to one rhythm, while its American brain conducted to another. After 23 minutes, the mismatch reached critical resonance, and the machine literally shook itself apart from conflicting instructions. The solution was elegant in its simplicity, requiring neither expensive software rewrites nor complex hardware modifications. A custom-fabricated harmonic dampener, precisely tuned to bridge the frequency gap between German engineering and American programming, could solve the problem for less than $300 in materials. Marcus drafted a technical report explaining his analysis, complete with acoustic frequency charts and thermal stress calculations that would have impressed his MIT professors. But he faced an impossible choice: submit the report and reveal his hidden qualifications, or watch innocent colleagues lose their jobs when the company collapsed. The decision was made for him on Friday morning, when he overheard Alexandra's private conversation with her assistant. She was planning to blame the engine failure on incompetent maintenance staff and facilities management that allowed contamination of critical components. Marcus realized she intended to make him the scapegoat for 3 months of engineering failures. Standing in that sterile hallway, surrounded by the trappings of corporate success that had never been meant for someone like him, Marcus felt his grandfather's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. Isaiah Thompson had faced similar moments during his years at Ford, when standing up meant risking everything but staying silent meant watching others suffer for failures that weren't their own. The German delegation would arrive Monday morning for the final demonstration. If the engine failed again, hundreds of jobs would vanish, and Marcus would be blamed for a problem he knew how to solve. The mathematics were simple, even if the emotional calculus was devastating. He could save the company, but only by destroying the careful invisibility that had protected him for 2 years. Sunday night, Marcus sat in his small apartment staring at his MIT diploma and thinking about roads not taken. Monday morning arrived with the weight of destiny pressing against Marcus's chest like a stone. The German delegation's black Mercedes sedans pulled into Precision Automotive's circular driveway at precisely 8 o'clock a.m., their arrival choreographed with the efficiency that had built Germany's industrial empire. Klaus Weber emerged first, his silver hair catching the California sunshine, followed by Dr. Heinrich Müller, whose reputation in automotive engineering was whispered with reverence across 3 continents. Marcus watched from the maintenance closet window as Alexandra Sterling descended the marble steps to greet her visitors. She wore her armor, a midnight blue suit that cost more than Marcus earned in 3 months, paired with confidence that masked the desperation eating her alive from the inside. The handshakes were firm, the smiles professional, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tightened just slightly when Klaus mentioned their tight schedule. The morning briefing took place in the executive conference room, where the broken engine sat like a mechanical altar surrounded by diagnostic equipment that had proven useless for 3 months. Dr. Walsh presented the technical specifications with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd given this presentation too many times. The German delegation listened with poker faces that revealed nothing, occasionally exchanging glances that could have meant anything. "Our testing protocols have been exhaustive," Dr. Walsh explained, her voice steady despite the career-ending implications if this demonstration failed. "We've isolated every variable, tested every component individually, and run simulations that should guarantee success." Klaus Weber's assistant typed notes on a tablet while Dr. Muller studied blueprints with the intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. These men hadn't traveled 6,000 miles to hear excuses. They'd come to see results, and results were exactly what Precision Automotive couldn't deliver. Marcus pushed his cart through the hallway outside, his ears tuned to every word filtering through the conference room's supposedly soundproof glass. He'd spent the weekend fabricating the harmonic dampener in his apartment's tiny garage, using tools inherited from his grandfather and materials purchased with his last $100. The device sat hidden in his maintenance cart, wrapped in an old shop rag like a secret weapon waiting for the right moment. The demonstration was scheduled for 2:00 p.m., giving the Germans time to tour the facility and review documentation. Marcus used those precious hours to position himself strategically, ensuring he'd be in the conference room when the inevitable failure occurred. He'd practiced his intervention a dozen times, knowing he'd have maybe 60 seconds to make his case before security escorted him out. At 1:45 p.m., the conference room filled with executives, board members, and senior engineers. The German delegation took seats in the front row like judges preparing to render verdict. Cameras rolled for the company's internal documentation, footage that would either celebrate triumph or document catastrophe for the corporate lawyers. Alexandra stood beside the engine with the poise of a matador, facing a bull she'd never successfully conquered. Her hands remained steady as she initiated the startup sequence, but Marcus could see the slight tremor in her left eyelid, a tell that betrayed her inner terror. The engine roared to life with mechanical thunder that filled the room with vibration and hope. For 22 minutes, perfection reigned. The diagnostic screens glowed green with optimal readings. Temperature remained stable. Pressure held steady. The Germans exchanged approving nods as the engine performed exactly as designed. Hope bloomed on every face in the room like flowers after rain. Then, at 23 minutes and 14 seconds, disaster struck with the cruel precision of a Swiss timepiece. The engine convulsed like a living thing in agony. Warning lights flashed red across every monitoring system. Temperature spiked into dangerous zones while pressure readings oscillated wildly. The familiar error message appeared on screens throughout the room. Harmonic resonance, failure, source unknown. Alexandra's face drained of color as she watched 3 months of preparation crumble in real time. Dr. Walsh frantically adjusted settings that made no difference. The German delegation's expressions shifted from interest to disappointment to barely concealed annoyance. Klaus Weber checked his watch with Germanic punctuality, already calculating flight times back to Munich. Emergency shutdown procedures engaged automatically, filling the room with the acrid smell of overheated electronics and burned hopes. In the sudden silence that followed, Marcus heard his grandfather's voice as clearly as if Isaiah Thompson stood beside him. "Sometimes you gotta stand up, son, even when standing might break you." Marcus stepped forward from his position near the back wall, his maintenance uniform drawing curious stares from men in $1,000 suits. His voice carried clearly through the conference room's acoustics, cutting through whispered conversations and nervous shuffles. "Ma'am, I believe I know what's causing the harmonic resonance failure." The room fell silent with the completeness of a held breath. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward him like spotlights, their collective attention heavy enough to crush weaker men. Alexandra's expression shifted from shock to something far more dangerous, opportunity wrapped in predatory calculation. She'd been looking for someone to blame, a scapegoat to absorb the crushing weight of failure. Now fate had delivered her the perfect victim, a maintenance worker arrogant enough to challenge his betters in front of international investors. This wasn't just termination. This was public execution disguised as corporate theater. The smile that spread across Alexandra's lips was sharp enough to draw blood. "Well, well," Alexandra said, her voice amplified through the conference room's sound system with theatrical precision. Our maintenance consultant has an opinion about advanced engineering." The word maintenance dripped with venom that made several executives visibly cringe. She stepped away from the podium, her designer heels clicking against polished marble like a countdown timer marking someone's final moments. "Marcus Thompson, isn't it?" she continued, circling him like a predator who'd cornered wounded prey. "The man who empties our trash cans and mops our floors thinks he understands what teams from MIT, Stanford, and Caltech couldn't solve in 3 months." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd of 200 employees pressed against the glass walls. They sensed blood in the water, corporate theater at its most brutal. This wasn't just about a broken engine anymore. This was about maintaining the natural order, keeping people in their designated places within the company hierarchy. Dr. Heinrich Mueller leaned forward in his front row seat, his steel-gray eyes studying Marcus with the intensity of a scientist examining an unexpected specimen. Beside him, Klaus Weber pulled out his leather notebook, uncapping an expensive fountain pen. In 40 years of international business, he'd learned that breakthrough solutions often emerged from the most unlikely sources. "Since you're so confident," Alexandra continued, her voice rising with theatrical flair, "here's your chance to prove it. Fix our $2.8 million engine that has stumped our best engineers for 3 months. Do it in front of everyone, our board, our investors, our entire company." She gestured toward the German delegation like a game show host presenting prizes. The boardroom buzzed with shocked murmurs. This was unprecedented, even by Silicon Valley's standards for corporate drama. Smartphones appeared as employees began recording what promised to be either a spectacular vindication or the most public professional execution in the company's history. "These gentlemen represent $150 million in potential funding," Alexandra continued, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "They flew 6,000 miles to witness American innovation. Let's give them a show they'll never forget." Marcus stood motionless, his maintenance cart beside him like a faithful companion. His calloused hands remained steady despite the earthquake of attention focused on his every breath. He thought of his grandfather Isaiah, who'd faced similar moments at Ford Motor Company, when challenging conventional wisdom meant risking everything. "Here are the stakes, Marcus." Alexandra's voice dropped to a whisper that the microphone caught and amplified throughout the room. "You have exactly 2 hours to diagnose and repair what our MIT-trained engineers couldn't fix in 3 months. If you succeed, which we both know you won't, I'll personally promote you to Senior Engineering Director with a salary that matches your inflated ego." The auditorium erupted in whispers. Senior Engineering Director positions commanded 6-figure salaries and stock options worth millions if the company succeeded. It was an absurd offer for someone whose current job description included emptying wastebaskets and maintaining supply closets. "But when you fail," Alexandra continued, her words cutting through the noise like a blade, "you're not just fired. You're banned from this building permanently. Security will escort you out, and I'll personally ensure that every tech company in Silicon Valley knows about your spectacular failure." She snapped her fingers, and 2 security guards materialized at the auditorium doors. Their presence wasn't subtle. This was intimidation theater designed to terrify anyone else who might consider stepping out of line. Dr. Mueller stood suddenly, his movement commanding attention throughout the room. At 62, Heinrich Mueller commanded respect that transcended corporate hierarchies. His work at BMW had revolutionized automotive engineering. His consulting firm counted every major manufacturer as clients. When he spoke, engineers across 3 continents listened. "I'll serve as technical witness," he announced, his accent adding gravitas to words that could determine Marcus's fate. "This test requires neutral oversight to ensure fairness and accuracy." Alexandra's predatory smile flickered momentarily. She hadn't anticipated this development. Dr. Mueller's involvement legitimized the challenge, transforming it from corporate humiliation into formal technical evaluation. Klaus Weber nodded approvingly, his expression suggesting genuine curiosity about American problem-solving methods. "Fine," Alexandra said, her voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "Dr. Mueller can witness your inevitable failure, but I'm adding one more condition." She gestured toward cameras that Tech Vanguard used for training videos and company announcements. "We're live streaming this entire challenge on our social media accounts. Let the world see what happens when unqualified people attempt jobs beyond their capabilities." Marketing assistants scrambled to establish professional lighting and camera angles. Social media managers crafted hashtags, #TechVanguardChallenge, #EngineeringTest, #InnovationAtWork. Within minutes, the company's Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube accounts would broadcast live footage to thousands of followers worldwide. Marcus felt the weight of history pressing against his shoulders. This wasn't just about fixing an engine or proving his worth to skeptical colleagues. This moment represented decades of systematic exclusion, of talented people dismissed because they didn't fit conventional expectations of what expertise looked like. He thought of his mother Dorothy, whose brilliant mind had designed transmissions for General Motors before corporate executives decided women didn't belong in engineering. He remembered his father Frank, whose courage at Ford had cost him everything when he chose truth over comfortable lies. Most powerfully, he felt his grandfather Isaiah's presence, that wise man who'd taught him that engines responded to respect and understanding rather than credentials and arrogance. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the room's perfect acoustics, "I've been listening to engines my whole life. This one's been trying to tell us what's wrong for months. We just haven't been hearing it correctly, Doctor." Mueller approached Marcus, studying his face with the intensity of someone who'd spent decades evaluating technical talent. "Young man," he said quietly, his words meant only for Marcus's ears, "are you absolutely certain you want to proceed? Your entire future hangs in the balance." Marcus met his gaze steadily, seeing not judgment but genuine curiosity in the older man's eyes. "Sir, my grandfather always said that engines have souls. They speak to people who know how to listen. This engine's been crying for help, and everyone's been too busy looking at computer screens to hear her voice." Something in Marcus's eyes reminded Dr. Mueller of the young engineers he'd mentored over 4 decades. That combination of knowledge, intuition, and quiet confidence that separated true talent from mere education. He nodded slowly, recognizing something authentic in this unexpected challenger. "Very well," Dr. Mueller announced loudly enough for the microphones to capture. "Let's see what you can do." The challenge was officially accepted. 2 hours to prove or destroy a lifetime of hidden expertise. The executive boardroom transformed into a gladiatorial arena, with 200 employees pressed against glass walls like spectators hungry for blood. Marcus approached the silent engine with the reverence his grandfather had shown to every mechanical patient that crossed his workbench. The crowd's whispers died as he placed both hands flat against the engine block, closing his eyes with the concentration of a physician taking a pulse. Dr. Mueller positioned himself beside the diagnostic equipment, his experienced eyes ready to interpret every data stream and measurement. Klaus Weber checked his platinum watch, 1:47 p.m. If Marcus was correct, they'd witness either the most brilliant piece of intuitive engineering in decades or the most spectacular professional suicide in corporate history. Alexandra's smartphone captured every moment for the live stream that had already attracted 50,000 viewers. The comments section scrolled with predictions, most favoring spectacular failure. She stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her silhouette framed against Silicon Valley's skyline like a general watching a battle she was certain she'd already won. It's fighting itself, Marcus said suddenly, his voice cutting through the room's tense silence. He opened his eyes, looking directly at Dr. Mueller. The engine's perfect, but it's trying to solve problems that don't actually exist. He moved to the technical documentation spread across the polished conference table, his fingers tracing specifications with the precision of someone who'd studied these blueprints during countless midnight cleaning sessions. This engine was manufactured in Munich using metric specifications, every bolt, every gasket, every tolerance measured in millimeters. Klaus Weber's eyebrows rose slightly. This wasn't the rambling of an unqualified maintenance worker. This was sophisticated technical analysis that addressed fundamental integration issues. But the control software was programmed here in California, Marcus continued, pulling out digital calipers from the diagnostic equipment. American engineers typically work in imperial measurements. The software expects components manufactured to American tolerances, but these German parts are built to much tighter specifications. Dr. Mueller leaned over the blueprints, his fountain pen following Marcus's calculations. Explain the significance. Marcus pointed to a critical junction where multiple systems intersected. German manufacturing tolerance allows plus or minus 0.001 millimeters. American tolerance typically allows plus or minus 0.005 inches, which converts to roughly 0.127 millimeters. That's 127 times more variation than what these components actually have. The engineering team exchanged glances of growing amazement. David Chen, the MIT graduate who'd been working on this problem for months, stepped forward with reluctant curiosity. You're suggesting the control system is overcompensating for imprecisions that don't exist? Exactly, Marcus nodded, his confidence growing as the technical logic unfolded. The software constantly micro-adjusts, trying to compensate for manufacturing variations that simply aren't there. It's like a conductor frantically trying to correct musicians who are already playing perfectly in tune. He gestured toward the oscilloscope displaying wave patterns that had baffled engineers for 3 months. These irregular spikes every 23 minutes? That's the control system reaching maximum compensation, then resetting when it realizes the corrections are making things worse. The engine literally shakes itself apart from conflicting instructions. Marcus reached into his maintenance cart and withdrew a metal disc roughly the size of a hockey puck, its surface covered with precisely calculated perforations. Instead of reprogramming the entire control system or remanufacturing components to different specifications, we install this harmonic dampener to bridge the frequency gap. Alexandra's confident expression cracked like ice under pressure. You're suggesting a $50 part can solve a problem that's consumed 3 months and millions in consulting fees? Sometimes the most elegant solutions are the simplest, Marcus replied, beginning the installation with movements that spoke of decades of mechanical experience. His hands worked with the confident precision of someone who'd rebuilt countless engines in Detroit garages and late-night apartment workshops. The installation required 12 minutes of careful work, each connection made with the methodical patience his grandfather had taught him. Marcus tested every joint twice, calibrated every adjustment with instruments that most of the watching engineers had never used outside of textbooks. Dr. Mueller observed every movement with professional fascination. Where did you learn harmonic resonance engineering? Marcus paused in his work, his voice carrying the weight of generational wisdom. My grandfather taught me that engines have souls. You can't fix a soul with computer programs or expensive parts. You have to listen to what it's trying to tell you, then help it find its natural rhythm. The dampener slid into place with the satisfying click of perfectly matched components. Marcus stepped back from the engine, wiping his hands on a shop rag that had belonged to his grandfather. Ready for testing. The boardroom fell silent except for the whisper of air conditioning and muffled heartbeats from 200 chests. Klaus Weber checked his watch. 1:59 p.m. 1 minute remained in the 2-hour challenge window. Dr. Mueller positioned himself at the diagnostic controls, his finger hovering over the ignition switch. The German investors leaned forward with collective anticipation. Alexandra's live stream had attracted over 100,000 viewers, with major tech industry figures joining the audience to witness this unprecedented corporate drama. "Start the engine," Dr. Mueller commanded. The ignition key turned with a metallic click that echoed through the silent boardroom like a gunshot. The engine awakened with a deep rumble that filled the space with mechanical thunder, but something was immediately, unmistakably different. The harsh, irregular knocking that had plagued the engine for months was gone. In its place emerged a smooth purring, the sound of precision engineering operating in perfect harmony. Each cylinder fired in flawless sequence, creating a mechanical symphony that made Dr. Mueller's eyes widen with recognition. Marcus stood beside the running engine, his hand resting lightly on its vibrating surface. Where once he'd felt desperate struggle, now he sensed the calm confidence of machinery operating within its natural rhythm. The harmonic dampener was working exactly as his grandfather's wisdom had predicted. The diagnostic screens exploded with green indicators for the first time in 3 months. Temperature readings stabilized in optimal ranges. Pressure sensors registered perfect compression across all cylinders. The error messages that had haunted engineers' nightmares vanished, replaced by steady streams of operational data. 23 minutes passed, then 25, 30. The dreaded shutdown point came and went without incident. The engine continued running with German precision, powered by American innovation, and guided by Detroit mechanical wisdom that bridged both worlds. Klaus Weber's assistant typed furiously on her tablet, documenting performance metrics that exceeded every specification in their investment proposal. The other German investors huddled in rapid conversation, their expressions shifting from skepticism to amazement to barely contained excitement about partnership possibilities that suddenly seemed limitless. The triumph lasted exactly 47 minutes and 32 seconds. Then the phone call came that shattered Marcus's moment of vindication like glass hitting concrete. Dr. Mueller had just finished documenting the engine's flawless performance when Marcus's ancient Nokia buzzed against his hip. The caller ID showed Mercy General Hospital, 3 words that could stop his heart faster than any corporate crisis. His hands trembled as he stepped away from the celebrating crowd to answer. "Mr. Thompson, this is Dr. Patricia Williams from Mercy General's Emergency Department. Your sister Sarah was brought in 20 minutes ago. She's stable, but you need to come immediately." The world tilted sideways. Marcus felt his knees buckle as the voice continued with clinical precision that couldn't soften the devastating blow. Her wheelchair caught fire in her apartment's electrical system malfunction. She suffered severe smoke inhalation and second-degree burns on her arms and legs. We're prepping her for emergency surgery. The phone slipped from Marcus's numb fingers, clattering against the marble floor like his collapsing dreams. 200 people were still celebrating his engineering triumph, but all he could hear was Sarah's voice from their last conversation. "I'm so proud of you, Marcus. Daddy and Granddaddy would be proud, too. You're finally going to show them all what Thompson men can do." Dr. Mueller noticed Marcus's distress immediately. The older man's engineering instincts extended to reading human crisis with the same precision he applied to mechanical failures. "What's wrong?" "My sister," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking on words that felt like shards of glass in his throat. "She's in the hospital. Burns from an electrical fire. I have to go." The celebration around them continued with oblivious enthusiasm. Klaus Weber was signing preliminary partnership agreements worth $150 million. Alexandra stood frozen by the windows, watching her carefully constructed world crumble as social media exploded with praise for the maintenance worker genius who'd solved what MIT couldn't. But Marcus couldn't stay for vindication or victory laps. The only family he had left was fighting for her life in a hospital he couldn't afford, facing medical bills that would dwarf anything his new position could pay. The cruel irony cut deeper than any corporate humiliation. Success had arrived at the exact moment it became meaningless. "Go," Dr. Muller said simply, understanding everything that mattered in that moment. "The engine will wait. Family cannot." Marcus gathered his grandfather's tools with shaking hands, each wrench and socket a tangible connection to men who'd taught him that character mattered more than recognition. The live stream cameras captured his departure, but the thousands of viewers couldn't comprehend the human cost of this corporate theater. The drive to Mercy General passed in a blur of traffic lights and desperate prayers to a God who seemed determined to test how much one man could endure. Marcus's mind raced between Sarah's condition and the impossible mathematics of medical debt that would follow. Even with his new salary, specialized burn treatment could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Insurance would cover some, but not enough. Never enough. He found Sarah in the ICU, her beautiful brown skin mottled with burns that made him physically ill to witness. The sister who'd inspired him through every setback lay unconscious beneath a web of tubes and monitors that beeped with mechanical urgency. Her laptop sat on the bedside table, screen displaying the accessibility software she'd been developing, innovations that could help millions of disabled Americans navigate technology designed without them in mind. Dr. Williams approached with the practiced compassion of someone who delivered life-altering news daily. The smoke inhalation damaged her lungs significantly. "We need to keep her sedated while the oxygen therapy works. The burns will require multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy." Marcus sank into a plastic chair that cost more per hour than most people earned in a day. His moment of corporate triumph felt like a cruel joke compared to Sarah's suffering. What good were engineering accolades when he couldn't protect the person who mattered most? His phone buzzed with messages from reporters wanting interviews about his David versus Goliath victory over Silicon Valley arrogance. LinkedIn notifications poured in from recruiters offering positions at Tesla, Apple, Google. The story was going viral. Hashtag maintenance worker, genius trending alongside hashtag corporate justice. But Marcus couldn't feel anything except the hollow ache of watching his sister fight for every breath. Success without Sarah to share it felt like ashes in his mouth. He'd spent 2 years hiding his talents to provide for his family, and now that sacrifice might not be enough to save her. The night shift nurse, an older black woman whose name tag read Dorothy, sat beside him during her break. "You're the young man from that video, aren't you? The one who fixed that engine and showed them fancy folks what real intelligence looks like?" Marcus nodded wordlessly, unable to trust his voice. "Your sister's been watching that live stream on repeat since they brought her in," Dorothy continued softly. "Even unconscious, she keeps smiling when they replay the part where you prove them all wrong. She's proud of you, baby. Prouder than you can imagine." The words broke something inside Marcus that had been barely holding together. Tears he'd suppressed for hours finally came, each sob carrying years of accumulated pain and desperate hope. He wept for his father's sacrificed dignity, his mother's fading memories, and his sister's undeserved suffering. Most of all, he cried for the impossible choice between professional triumph and personal catastrophe. Outside Sarah's window, Silicon Valley glittered with the dreams of ambitious people who'd never had to choose between success and survival. Inside that sterile room, Marcus Thompson learned that some victories cost more than defeats. 3 days later, as Sarah fought for her life on a ventilator, the first revelation arrived in Marcus's email inbox like lightning splitting a dark sky. The sender was Robert Chen, Alexandra's former personal assistant, whose subject line read, "The truth about the engine. You deserve to know." Marcus opened the message on his laptop in the hospital waiting room, expecting another interview request from tech journalists who'd turned his story into Silicon Valley folklore. Instead, he found a confession that would reshape everything he thought he understood about the past 3 months. "Marcus," the email began, "I can't live with what I've done. The engine failures weren't random. I sabotaged the diagnostic systems on Alexandra's orders, but not for the reasons you think. She wasn't trying to destroy the company. She was trying to save it from something worse." Marcus's hands trembled as he scrolled through Chen's detailed explanation. For 6 months, Alexandra had been receiving anonymous threats about industrial accidents that would cripple Precision Automotive unless she paid protection money to shadowy competitors. The engine failures were orchestrated to create a crisis that would justify increased security measures and investigations without alerting the extortionists. Alexandra thought if she could solve the fake problem publicly, it would demonstrate strength and deter future threats, Chen continued. She never expected you to actually fix what she thought was unfixable. Your solution exposed that the sabotage was internal, not external. She's been protecting the company while looking like the villain. The second revelation came 12 hours later, delivered by Dr. Heinrich Müller himself, who appeared in the ICU waiting room like a figure from Marcus's fevered imagination. The distinguished German engineer carried a leather briefcase and wore an expression that mixed professional respect with personal urgency. "I've been researching your family history," Dr. Müller said without preamble, settling into the plastic chair beside Marcus. "Your father, Frank Thompson. I knew him. We served together on an International Automotive Safety Commission in 1998. He saved dozens of lives by exposing defective brake systems that corporate executives wanted to hide." Marcus stared at the older man, feeling the ground shift beneath everything he'd believed about his father's disgrace at Ford. But he was fired, blacklisted, his career destroyed. "Officially, yes," Dr. Müller nodded gravely. "Unofficially, he was a hero who chose public safety over corporate profits. The brake defects he exposed would have killed hundreds of people. Ford buried the story and destroyed his reputation to prevent lawsuits, but the European automotive community never forgot his courage." Dr. Müller opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder marked "Confidential." "Your father's technical reports became the foundation for international safety standards still used today. Every brake system in every car manufactured in Europe incorporates safety measures he designed. He saved more lives than most engineers could dream of affecting." The third revelation was the most devastating, arriving through a phone call from Marcus's mother's care facility. Dorothy Thompson, despite her advancing Alzheimer's, had been following news coverage of her son's triumph with moments of startling clarity that pierced through her cognitive fog. "She's been asking for you constantly," explained Janet Rodriguez, the head nurse. "But she's also been saying things about Alexandra Sterling that didn't make sense until we saw the news coverage. She keeps insisting that Alexandra is Charlie Sterling's little girl, and that Charlie was Frank's best friend before the war broke them apart." Marcus drove to the care facility through traffic that seemed surreal after days of hospital vigils. He found his mother in the memory care unit's common room, her eyes momentarily sharp with recognition when he approached her wheelchair. "Marcus, baby," Dorothy whispered, her voice carrying echoes of the brilliant woman who'd once designed transmissions for General Motors. "That girl on TV, Alexandra, I knew her daddy before Vietnam changed everything. Charlie Sterling and your father were like brothers until the system pitted them against each other." Dorothy's lucid moments were precious and unpredictable, but her memories of the late 1960s remained vivid. Charlie and Frank both got drafted. Frank came back with medals and nightmares. Charlie came back with a Purple Heart and a drinking problem that corporate America exploited. They turned him against Frank by convincing him that black engineers were taking opportunities from deserving white veterans. The story unfolded in fragments as Dorothy's clarity faded in and out like a radio signal in a thunderstorm. Frank Thompson and Charles Sterling had been roommates at Automotive Technical College, study partners who'd dreamed of revolutionizing American car manufacturing. The war had sent them to different units in Vietnam, where they'd both seen friends die because of equipment failures caused by corporate cost-cutting. They came home determined to hold companies accountable, Dorothy continued, her voice growing distant as memory retreated behind the fog of disease. But the executives knew how to divide them. Told Charlie that Frank was getting promoted because of affirmative action, not merit. Made him believe that speaking up would help his own people instead of serving justice. Marcus felt pieces of a generational puzzle clicking into place with horrifying clarity. His father's disgrace at Ford hadn't been about incompetence or insubordination. It had been about choosing principle over personal advancement, just as Marcus had done 3 days earlier. Charles Sterling's hostility hadn't been random racism, but manufactured resentment, carefully cultivated by corporate executives who understood that divided opposition was ineffective opposition. "Alexandra don't know the real story," Dorothy whispered, her eyes focusing on Marcus with heartbreaking intensity. "She thinks her daddy was weak and you daddy was the enemy. But they were both victims of the same system that's still trying to turn good people against each other." The revelations continued cascading like dominoes falling in slow motion. Alexandra's cruelty wasn't born from personal malice but from inherited trauma, a daughter trying to restore her father's honor by defeating the son of the man she blamed for his failures. Marcus's sacrifice wasn't unique, but generational. Part of a pattern where talented people destroyed themselves, trying to prove their worth to systems designed to exploit their desperation. As Sarah's monitors beeped steadily in the background of his consciousness, Marcus realized that his corporate triumph had been orchestrated by the same forces that had destroyed both their fathers. The real enemy wasn't Alexandra Sterling or even systemic racism. It was a corporate structure that thrived on manufactured conflict between people who should have been allies. The truth was more complex and more tragic than either revenge or redemption. It was about healing wounds that predated both of them, breaking cycles of inherited trauma, and finding ways to honor their father's sacrifices without perpetuating the conflicts that had destroyed so much potential. 6 months after the live stream that changed everything, Marcus Thompson stood in the renovated workshop of what had once been his grandfather's Detroit garage. The space hummed with purposeful activity as young engineers from across the country worked alongside seasoned mechanics, their diverse voices creating a symphony of collaboration that would have made Isaiah Thompson proud. Sarah rolled her wheelchair between workstations. Her burns healed, but her spirit transformed by surviving fire into something stronger than steel. The accessibility innovation she'd developed during her recovery had attracted attention from major tech companies, but she'd chosen to join Marcus's new venture instead, Thompson Engineering Solutions, a consulting firm that specialized in bridging the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical wisdom. "The hydraulic lift system is ready for testing," announced Jessica Martinez, a recent MIT graduate whose thesis on sustainable manufacturing had impressed even Dr. Mueller. She worked beside Tommy Williams, a 60-year-old master mechanic who'd learned his trade in the same Detroit neighborhoods that had shaped the Thompson family for 3 generations. Marcus watched the unlikely partnership with deep satisfaction. Jessica's advanced engineering degree complemented Tommy's intuitive understanding of mechanical systems. Together, they were developing manufacturing processes that honored both precision and craftsmanship, innovations that neither could have achieved alone. The transformation had begun with a phone call from Alexandra Sterling 3 weeks after the hospital revelations. Her voice had carried none of its former arrogance, replaced instead by the humility of someone who'd confronted the destructive power of inherited trauma. "I've been talking to my therapist about the things my mother told me about Vietnam and my father's relationship with yours," she'd said during that awkward but necessary conversation. "I need to apologize not just for my behavior, but for perpetuating conflicts that should have died with our parents' generation." The corporate restructuring that followed had been swift and comprehensive. Alexandra stepped down as CEO, accepting a consulting role that utilized her strategic brilliance while removing her from day-to-day management. The board appointed Dr. Heinrich Müller as interim CEO, his European perspective bringing fresh approaches to American corporate culture. Marcus had declined the senior engineering director position, choosing instead to start his own company with the severance package Precision Automotive offered as part of their public commitment to workplace justice. The decision had shocked Silicon Valley observers who expected him to claim his corporate throne, but Marcus had learned from his grandfather that true success meant building something lasting rather than simply climbing someone else's ladder. Thompson Engineering Solutions operated from the restored garage where Isaiah had first taught Marcus to listen to engines' mechanical heartbeats. The space retained its original character: concrete floors stained with decades of honest work, hand tools hanging on pegboard walls, the lingering scent of motor oil and dreams, while incorporating modern equipment that connected traditional craftsmanship with contemporary innovation. The company's first major contract had come from an unexpected source: Hoffmann Automotive Group, Klaus Weber's German conglomerate. Dr. Muller had recommended Thompson Engineering to solve manufacturing problems that traditional consultants couldn't address. Their success with hybrid engine optimization had led to partnerships with Ford, General Motors, and Tesla, companies eager to tap into the wisdom that combined advanced engineering with time-tested mechanical intuition. "Marcus, the news crew is here for the documentary interview," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the strength that had sustained her through months of physical therapy and surgical procedures. The burns had left scars that would remain forever, but they'd also revealed reserves of courage that transformed her from someone who survived circumstances into someone who shaped them. The PBS documentary team was creating a film about innovation in American manufacturing, focusing on stories that challenged conventional assumptions about where breakthrough ideas originated. Marcus had initially resisted the attention, preferring to let his work speak for itself, but Sarah had convinced him that visibility could inspire other young people whose talents were being overlooked by systems designed to exclude them. The interview took place beside the restored 1967 Mustang that had been Isaiah's pride and joy. Marcus's grandfather had never lived to see his teachings validated on a global stage, but his spirit permeated every conversation about mechanical wisdom and patient problem-solving. "What surprised you most about the corporate response to your story?" asked the documentary filmmaker, a young woman whose genuine curiosity reminded Marcus of the engineering students who now sought mentorship at Thompson Engineering. Marcus considered the question while polishing chrome that reflected his grandfather's garage exactly as Isaiah had maintained it. "I expected more resistance to change. Instead, I found that most people, even corporate executives, genuinely want to do the right thing. They just need systems that make ethical choices easier than profitable shortcuts." The camera captured the diverse group of engineers and mechanics working together on projects that ranged from electric vehicle optimization to accessibility technologies. The scene would have been impossible to imagine in Isaiah's era, when rigid hierarchies separated college graduates from vocational experts. Now, innovation flourished at the intersection of academic knowledge and practical experience. Alexandra arrived unexpectedly during the filming, her presence creating momentary tension until Marcus welcomed her with genuine warmth. The public reconciliation had been gradual and sometimes painful, but it had evolved into mutual respect based on shared commitment to healing generational wounds. "I wanted to thank you publicly for showing me what leadership actually looks like," Alexandra told the camera, her voice steady with hard-earned humility. "Real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about creating environments where everyone can contribute their best work." She'd used her corporate connections and financial resources to establish the Charles Sterling and Frank Thompson Foundation, which provided scholarships for underrepresented students pursuing careers in engineering and skilled trades. The foundation's work ensured that future generations wouldn't have to choose between education and economic survival the way both men had been forced to do. As the afternoon sun slanted through the garage windows, Marcus felt the presence of previous generations who'd struggled to create opportunities that he now had the privilege to extend to others. His success wasn't personal achievement but collective triumph, proof that talent could overcome systemic barriers when good people chose collaboration over competition. Dorothy Thompson, despite her advancing Alzheimer's, had experienced moments of clarity during which she recognized her son's accomplishments with fierce maternal pride. During her final lucid conversation, she'd gripped his hand with surprising strength and whispered, "Your daddy and granddaddy are smiling, baby. You kept the promise they couldn't keep. You showed the world what Thompson men can build when given the chance." The documentary crew captured the essence of transformation that extended far beyond individual success stories. Thompson Engineering Solutions had become a model for inclusive innovation, demonstrating that diversity of perspective created stronger solutions than homogeneous expertise. The garage that had once symbolized limitation now represented limitless possibility. As evening settled over Detroit, Marcus stood in his grandfather's restored garage, watching 3 generations of engineers work side by side on innovations that would have seemed impossible just months before. The air hummed with the sound of dreams being built by calloused hands and brilliant minds united in common purpose. The documentary cameras had captured something profound, not just a story of individual triumph, but proof that America's greatest strength had always been its ability to transform division into unity, prejudice into understanding, and inherited trauma into generational healing. Thompson Engineering Solutions had become more than a business. It had become a bridge between worlds that corporate America had kept artificially separate for too long. Sarah rolled her wheelchair to the window, her laptop displaying accessibility software that would soon help millions of disabled Americans navigate technology designed without them in mind. Her scars had become symbols of resilience rather than reminders of suffering, proof that fire could forge strength rather than destroy dreams. "You know what Granddaddy would say about all this?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying the warmth that had sustained Marcus through his darkest moments. Marcus smiled, hearing Isaiah Thompson's voice as clearly as if the old man stood beside them. "Still waters run deep, and the deepest wells provide the sweetest water." The garage fell silent, except for the gentle hum of machinery and the distant sound of traffic carrying people home to families they cherished. Outside, Detroit's skyline glittered with the lights of a city that had learned to rebuild itself stronger after every setback, just as the Thompson family had done for 3 generations. Dr. Muller appeared in the doorway, his silver hair catching the fluorescent light as he surveyed the workshop that had become a model for manufacturing innovation worldwide. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said simply, his German accent lending weight to words that carried the authority of 4 decades in automotive engineering. "He is proud," Marcus replied, feeling Isaiah's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. "All of them are." Alexandra arrived as the sun disappeared behind Detroit's industrial horizon, her rental car looking out of place among the pickup trucks and motorcycles that belonged to Thompson Engineering's diverse workforce. The reconciliation between their families had been gradual and sometimes painful, but it had evolved into something genuine, mutual respect based on shared commitment to healing wounds that predated both of them. The Foundation Board approved funding for 12 more scholarships, she announced, her voice carrying none of its former arrogance. The Charles Sterling and Frank Thompson Foundation had become her mission of redemption, ensuring that future generations wouldn't have to choose between education and economic survival the way both their fathers had been forced to do. Marcus nodded his appreciation while continuing to adjust the carburetor on Isaiah's restored Mustang. The car ran perfectly now, its engine purring with the contentment of machinery maintained by hands that understood its mechanical soul. It would never be sold or displayed in a museum. It would remain in the garage where it belonged, a reminder that some treasures gained value through use rather than preservation. The evening's work session was interrupted by the arrival of Tommy Williams, the master mechanic whose partnership with MIT graduate Jessica Martinez had produced innovations that neither could have achieved alone. Behind him came a group of high school students from Detroit's East Side, young people whose talents had been overlooked by educational systems designed to funnel them towards standardized futures rather than discover their unique gifts. "These kids got questions about the apprenticeship program," Tommy announced, his weathered face creasing with pride as he introduced teenagers whose eyes blazed with the same hunger for knowledge that had driven every Thompson generation. They represented the future Isaiah had dreamed of, young Americans whose potential wouldn't be limited by zip codes or preconceptions about who belonged in engineering careers. Marcus set down his tools and faced the group with the patient attention his grandfather had shown to every curious visitor who'd found their way to this garage over the decades. "What do you want to know?" The questions came in a rush of enthusiasm and uncertainty. Could they really learn engineering without college degrees? Would companies hire mechanics who understood advanced technology? Was there room in modern manufacturing for the kind of intuitive problem-solving that had made American industry great? Marcus answered each question with the wisdom accumulated through years of hiding his talents and the joy of finally being able to share them openly. Yes, there were multiple paths to expertise. Yes, companies desperately needed people who could bridge theoretical knowledge with practical application. And most importantly, yes, there would always be room for Americans who combined intelligence with work ethic, creativity with persistence, and dreams with the courage to pursue them against all odds. As the young visitors departed with application packets and hearts full of possibility, Marcus felt the satisfaction of completing a circle that had begun in this same garage 60 years earlier. Isaiah Thompson's investment in one curious grandson had multiplied into opportunities for hundreds of young people whose talents might otherwise have been wasted. The story that had begun with corporate humiliation and public challenge had evolved into something larger than individual success. It had become proof that America's promise of opportunity for all was still alive, still worth fighting for, and still capable of transforming lives when good people chose inclusion over division, collaboration over competition, and hope over inherited despair. Sarah powered down her laptop as the garage prepared to close for the night, her accessibility innovations safely saved to servers that would distribute them to users worldwide. "Think we changed anything, Marcus?" Marcus looked around the restored garage where his grandfather's tools hung beside computer terminals, where mechanical wisdom merged with digital innovation, where the past's lessons informed the future's possibilities. The space hummed with the contentment of dreams fulfilled and new ones taking root. "We didn't change anything, sis," he said, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones like his grandfather's teachings. "We just reminded folks what was always possible when we stop fighting each other and start building together." Friends, this story touches something deep in the American heart. The belief that talent and character matter more than credentials or circumstances. Marcus Thompson's journey from invisible maintenance worker to respected innovator reminds us that our greatest treasures often come wrapped in unexpected packages. In our families, communities, and workplaces, how many talented people are we overlooking because they don't fit our preconceptions about what expertise looks like? And when was the last time someone's quiet competence surprised you in a way that challenged your assumptions about their potential? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed hidden talent finally get the recognition it deserved? Or perhaps you've been underestimated yourself and found the courage to prove your worth. Your story might inspire someone else who's been waiting for their moment to shine.